There is a kind of silence that settles over a city just before dawn. Not the gentle hush of sleep, but the quiet twitch of breath held, waiting. In Oak Ridge, a city still wiping the dreams from its eyes. That silence was broken by the distant wail of sirens, an amber ripple down the slush-wet streets. Fire Engine 3 barreled through the fog, red lights carving tunnels through what was left of the night. Inside, the crew didn't speak. The only sounds were the radio crackle and the rhythmic bounce of gear against metal lockers. Each man and woman wrestled with thoughts they wouldn't voice, not until later, when the job was done and the smell of smoke lingered in their hair. For Fire Station 47, every rescue mattered. The smallest lives were often the ones they remembered most. But on a quiet November morning, just as a pale sun blinked through the haze, one rescue would slip in quiet, not announced by tears or sirens, just a soft shuffle, 4 legs, a tail, and a look in the eyes that said, "I didn't mean to be found, but I was." There have always been mascots, ask an old-timer, and they'll talk about Dalmatians chasing horse-drawn rigs through soot-covered streets. Back then, smoke smelled like ashwood, helmets were made of tin, and dogs, well, they were more than morale. They were guardians. They stood vigil by the trucks, waited beside doors that might never open again, comforted men who couldn't sleep with their memories. They were just mutts, mostly, but the station forgot what it was without them. Those stories lived on like ghost smudges on brick walls, something whispered in between drills or after too much whiskey. The dogs that knew the rhythm of alarms the way others knew lullabies. But this story isn't about a memory. It's about the present, a moment that quietly rewrote the lifeline of a house built on heat and heroism. It begins with smoke, with a building no longer standing, but more importantly, with a pawprint. The locals called it the Old Auto Shop on Miller Street. No one remembered the official name after the sign rusted and the paint peeled back into the bones of the wall. It had burned before, small fires, electrical maybe, but that morning it was heat and wood and wind working in unholy rhythm. By the time Station 47 got there, the cloud was chewing at the skyline. Bystanders in bathrobes stood behind yellow tape, mouths open, coffee forgotten in trembling hands. A homeless man shouted warnings no one understood. The usual chaos, the routine disaster, perfectly unpredictable. The crew went in, but in the middle of it all, between shouting commands and dragging lines, someone spotted movement from the far left of the building. Not fast, not human, something grey and low, slinking through the haze like smoke wearing a body. It wasn't running, wasn't barking, just walking, as though drawn in, or maybe let out later. No one could say exactly how he made it that far. He wasn't burned, not badly, but soot covered him like old regret. His fur clumped into char at the ends, every breath a small cough, yet his eyes looked around like he was used to danger wearing other names. Big Mike was the first to spot him, right as they opened the south entry. Hey, what's this?" he said, kneeling. "How'd you even get in here, buddy?" At first, they thought he'd run. Most strays do, their instinct tuned sharp by years of chase and escape. But this one didn't move. He sat, not in fear, not even in submission, just sat watching them, head tilted slightly, like he'd been waiting for someone to finally notice. He was still here when Jenny Parks knelt to meet his gaze. He didn't flinch, just blinked, long and slow. The kind of blink that says, "Okay, I'll come with you, but only because I chose to." That was the day Ash walked into their lives. He didn't have that name yet. Back then, he was nameless. An outline through smoke. But he followed, wobbling a little, to the fire truck's edge. He hopped up with hesitation and settled on a coil of hose like it had been waiting for him all along. He rode to the station without a leash, without a plan, just sat curled, panting faintly, the world moving too fast around him. Nobody spoke at first. What do you say when trouble drags its own shadow into your house, quietly curls on the floor, and looks at you like you already belong to it? Rodriguez, the station medic, offered water in a metal bowl. Big Mike tossed a leftover stick of beef jerky. Jenny just knelt again beside him and said, "You're staying the night, aren't you?" The dog didn't answer, but he didn't leave. Either. Stations are loud places, even in their stillness. Boots drop to the floor like thunderclaps. Radios mumble static profits. Laughter bounces between lockers. But that night, everything softened a little. The dog, still unnamed, slept belly up by the laundry dryer, its hum rattling gently like a lullaby written for those who never expected peace. They made a bed out of old turnout blankets. He didn't use it, preferred the spot by the back door, ear twitching at every groan of the wind. Nobody said it aloud, but something about him made them move slower near him, speak quieter, as if he were breakable in a way nothing else inside that stone building was. By morning, the sky had cleared. Cold light dripped onto Station 47's entrance. Footsteps echoed. Coffee boiled. Life resumed, but an empty water bowl sat at the foot of a red locker, close to where the stranger had decided he now lived. The name came later, with a simple observation, like ash out of a fire, Rodriguez said. That's how he walked out, like something survived that shouldn't have. And so Ash he became, part mascot, part ghost, part heartbeat for a house already overflowing with them. Not everyone understood right away. The chief raised a brow at the idea of an unregistered animal cohabiting government property. The city clerk muttered about liability. The health inspector asked about shots, but every worry met the same response. He's not ours. He just lives here now. They weren't lying. Ash didn't belong to anyone, not even Jenny, though she was the one who picked up his tags and whispered reassurances during storms and snuck him kitchen bacon. Not even Big Mike, though Ash curled next to his feet every poker night like clockwork. No. Ash belonged to the building dot, to the space between kitchen and engine bay, to the quiet 3 a.m. hours when the radio slept and the moon blinked alone. He wasn't a recruit, but he wore the badge in spirit. He didn't remember the first time he was cold, just that most days were that way. Cold in the bones, cold in the belly, cold in the glance of people who passed without looking twice. The city streets were wide in a way that made him smaller. On some mornings, fog clung to the sidewalk like breath waiting to vanish, and in that hush he moved, not always with purpose, but always forward. Forward was quiet. Forward was safer than still. He watched people from doorways and alley corners, always just far enough away not to be noticed, but close enough to see the things they left behind. Bits of food, splashes of spilled coffee, a glove, a sigh. He was a scrap of fur with mud where white used to be, ribs like bent coat hangers under skin. He didn't trust humans, not really, but he didn't fear them either. They were just there, big, loud, sometimes kind, One had knelt once, offered half a muffin from gloved fingers, and called him Buddy. He hadn't moved. She'd left the treat on a curb and walked away. He'd waited an hour before creeping forward to eat it, eyes darting every direction. There were places he knew would be safe enough to sleep. The back corner behind Lenny's diner, that's where the kitchen pipes exhaled warm steam. Once or twice, Lenny himself emerged, scowled, muttered something about fleas and furballs before dropping a scoop of scrambled eggs near the trash. Then there was the hardware store across from the old Lutheran church. The owner left a bowl out, brought in when it froze solid at night. Sometimes it was full, sometimes not, but it meant someone noticed. And for a creature built mostly of silence, that mattered. He wasn't truly stray in his own mind, because it suggested he'd come from somewhere, that he belonged elsewhere and had lost it. He couldn't remember a beginning. No collar, no hands he longed for, just streets and steam and the scent of fried food in the gutters. At night, noises echoed sharp, the clatter of lids, the clink of bottles, the lurch of drunk footsteps. He learned the art of listening the way others mastered music or math. A muffler backfire meant hide. A soft cooing voice meant pause, not trust, but consider. The shuffle of a boy's sneakers once ended in him catching a flying crust of bread mid-air. They made eye contact. The boy smiled. The dog didn't, but he didn't forget. He was patient, quietly watching lives not built for him. And then one morning, the wind changed. It carried the wrong kind of warmth, acrid, sharp. A warning he understood with every cell in his soot-coated frame. Smoke meant movement. Smoke meant flee. But this time, for some reason he'd never know, he turned toward it. The wind kicked up embers, invisible to human eyes. He smelled chemicals blistering under metal, heard the soft pop crack of wood surrendering to heat, and between alley walls painted with last year's frost graffiti, he followed the scent of disaster. He wasn't thinking, not in the way people do. It was instinct, a pull like blue light to dusk, like gravity. Maybe it was the hope of warmth. Maybe it was memory pretending to be memory. Maybe some old part of him recognized the rhythm of fear it had heard once long ago. The closer he got, the more the city warped. People shouted. Sirens blared. A woman sobbed into the crook of her own elbows. Tape unspooled like flags in a war zone built from cracked pavement. Nobody noticed the dog. He crossed Miller Street during a lull between screams, walked with the odd calm of creatures used to moving unnoticed. The auto shop was a skeleton of its former self. Flames licked through the open ribs of broken windows. Tires popped like gunshots. And still, he moved closer. A man in a suit tried to wave him off. Hey, hey! But the dog didn't stop. Just kept walking. Into smoke that billowed like breath from an old god's mouth. Into the shifting grey that made shapes dance and vanish. Into the chaos that would become the start of something else entirely. His paws, charred at the edges, left faint imprints in the floor's dust. And if anyone had noticed, they'd say it looked deliberate, like he wasn't lost, like he was answering a call no one knew how long he was inside. Some said a minute, some said 5, long enough that everyone forgot to look. But when he appeared again, it wasn't dramatic. No barking announcement, no limping escape. He just emerged, all grey and quiet, walking through the smoke as if it made a coat around him, unbothered, unrushed. His gaze was steady, eyes rimmed red not from fear, but from exposure, from time, from things nobody would name. And without knowing it, he had already begun changing everything. There was something uncanny about the way he carried himself. He didn't dart like the others, didn't cower. He didn't belong to Fear Not, obviously. It was in him, sure, but it didn't rule him. It sat beside him like a passenger. He watched them, the people in coats and masks and gear that jangled, big gestures, barked orders, chaos made human. And in their middle, he curled his tail around his legs and sat, not like a beggar, like a witness. And later, when voices tried to wrap words around what happened, they couldn't quite explain why they'd let him stay, but really, he never left. That night, he wandered back near the scene, drawn perhaps by the rhythm of flashing lights or rubber soles that didn't chase. He lingered near the fire truck as it idled, walked beside boots large enough to step on him, and didn't flinch when a hand moved fast. They called them dogs before they had names, the mutt, that stray, Firehouse, Fido. But that wasn't who he was. He watched them as they worked, and when the fire was out and the building had collapsed into steaming hush, he remained, smudged like chalk on blacktop, still waiting. That was all he had done to be remembered forever. He waited. Fire doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it creeps, slides through door frames like a thief, begs you to notice it too late. The call came in at 5:46 a.m. Structure fire, industrial zone, heavy smoke, possible squatters inside. By the time Engine 3 roared past Ridgepoint and barreled toward Miller Street, the sky was an indifferent grey. Pre-dawn chill clung to the windows. Inside the cab, no one spoke, but palms gripped gear like the day already knew it wouldn't let go easy. The old auto shop was no stranger to trouble. They'd been out here twice in the past year for electrical flare-ups and vandalism. But this time, the fire had teeth, and it bit deep, fast. The moment the truck doors opened, the crew fell into place like cogs in a clock. Boots struck pavement, hoses unfurled, radios crackled like nervous insects. Captain Yates surveyed the blaze through narrowed eyes, east walls buckling. We keep it outside unless we find movement. Rookie Jenny Parks was adjusting her, masked when Rodriguez nudged her with a shoulder. First light and already earning your pension, Parksy. She rolled her eyes. You trying to jinx us, just giving the day its proper welcome. Big Mike stomped up behind them, holding a pry bar in one hand, coffee thermos in the other. You want jinxed. I just paid off my truck. That's the real curse. They shared half a laugh, just enough to remember they were human before becoming something else, entirely part instinct, part flame-dancer. Inside, visibility was near nothing. Each step cracked glass or caught on metal. The wet hiss of foam and steam mixed with radio. Static. The inferno wound upward, greedy and alive. Jenny took point alongside Mike near the south entrance. Somewhere across the tangle of smoke and steel, someone shouted, "Movement." But it was falser, fallen beam twitching in the heat. Rodriguez, sweeping near the west wall, was the first to hear the sound. "Hey, hold up. I hear," he paused, tilted his head. Something low to the ground, not machinery. Mike moved closer to his voice. Gas line, hiss from insulation. Rodriguez shook his head. "No, this is breathing." Then came the outline. Slung, a form limping through the thinnest part of the haze, just past the warped tool bench. At first, Jenny thought it was debris tumbling. Then it blinked, two eyes caught the headlamp glare. Not afraid, just aware. "Captain," she called. It's a dog." The crew paused. Time held its breath. The figure emerged with the same deliberate pace he'd used with the cities, alleys, stepping from shadow like it was something he'd grown from. His fur held the foam of soot. The smell of scorched rubber clung to him. Yet he stood, not a rescue, not a victim, just ... present. Big Mike squatted down, his voice softer than the screaming structure around him. "Where'd you even come from?" "Huh." The dog didn't flinch at the sound, didn't run. He stopped 2 feet from Jenny's boots, looked her in the eye. Jenny froze. That same slow blink, the same weighted stillness she remembered from the alley behind the crash site. It was like Dacia, vu with fur. She reached forward tentatively, hand-gloved and palmed flat. "You don't have to stay here anymore." The dog sniffed, then stepped forward, but not toward her hand, toward her hip, where a loop of rope hung. He sat beside it, composed, as if waiting to clock in. Getting him outside wasn't hard. He followed them without hesitation, footing uncertain on slush and ash. Crowds gasped, phones lifted, but none of that mattered. The firefight raged another 37 minutes, but the crew had already decided whatever else was lost. Something had been found. Back at the rig, the dog refused to leave Jenny's side. Even hopped up into the cab before anyone could stop him. "He adopted you," Rodriguez said, wiping ash from his face. "Congratulations." Jenny gave a dry chuckle, hand resting on the scruff of his neck. "I think he adopted all of us." At the station, the debrief was brief. Minor damage, no serious injuries, structural loss only, but everyone kept glancing toward the back corner of the garage, where a shape had curled into a tight grey ball atop an emergency blanket, eyes half open, ears twitching at every nearby bang of a dropped helmet or closing. "Door, no tags, no chip," said the local tech, tapping at their scanner. "Not recent." "Well, he's recent now," Big Mike replied, dropping into a chair with a grunt. Rodriguez tossed a half-eaten sandwich his way. The dog caught it mid-air, barely blinked. By evening, the crew was already brainstorming names: Sootball, Cinders, Ghost. Jenny watched him from her cot. In the low light of the bunk room, he looked like a sketch erased to many. Times, outlines barely visible. "Ash," Rodriguez finally said. The word hung, fitting, unadorned. That's how he came out at that place. "Like ash caught in wind," he added. And just like that stuck. Ash didn't make a scene. He didn't whine, didn't bark, didn't protest when meals were missed or when boots stepped too close. He had just found a corner near the lockers and made it his own. When sirens test ran during drills, his ears perked when calls went out. He stood at the bay door and watched the engines disappear, tail still the whole time. By midnight, someone had fashioned a water bowl from an old helmet. By next dawn, he'd learned the place where Jenny kept the bacon. No formal decision ever declared Ash part of Station 47. It was more like ... gravity. One day he wasn't there. The next, nobody remembered how the place looked without him. It was Jenny who brought the collar. Black nylon, simple buckle. A cheap metal tag she had etched herself at a kiosk in the grocery store vestibule. Just 5 letters, A-S-H. She knelt beside where he was curled at the end of the hall, tail flicking, in his sleep. When her hand touched his fur, his eyes opened, slow, as if to ask, "Is it already morning?" She held it out like an offering. He sniffed, blinked, licked her wrist once. That was enough. He wore it like he was always meant to. as if the name had been waiting for him to arrive. Ash learned the routine, quickly quieter than the bells and buzzers could teach. He seemed to know that engines meant movement, that sirens meant wait. When the tones dropped, he'd run too. The bay doors, tail high, not barking, not frantic, just present. Sentinel like the rest. He didn't follow them on calls, not for long, anyway. They tried once, early on, but the logistics didn't support stowaways, even of the four-legged kind. But he'd be there when they came back, stubbornly waiting. Paws planted in that same faded square of rubber tile near the rear entrance. Rain or snow, midday or heaven of midnight. Someone joked he had a better attendance record than Rodriguez. He slept wherever he liked. In the gear room beside Big Mike's boots, behind the dryer in the laundry alcove, curled atop a pile of turnout coats shoved into a corner like he'd claimed the forgotten things as a throne. But he never entered the bunk. Not once. He would pad up to the entrance, glance at the rows of metal-framed beds, and retreat, as if sleep in that quiet catalogue of breath wasn't his to borrow. Ash didn't bark when the new rookies came in. He stared at them, long and deliberate, as if weighing their worth by something silent. One, a jittery paramedic fresh from the academy, asked if the dog was going to bite him. "Nah," Jenny replied, sipping coffee. "He only bites when someone lies." A week later, the paramedic confessed he'd misreported a call detail out of panic. Said he couldn't keep lying, not with those eyes watching. They started calling Ash the therapist. He'd nudge into ribs after long hauls, curl under desk chairs when somebody had just spent too much time staring at the wall. When Jenkins lost his father, Ash curled beside him on the bench outside, both watching the same horizon with equal stillness. There was the time he broke up a fight. Tensions were high after a backdraft incident. Two firefighters, tempers flaring, yelling loud enough to rattle the ceiling tiles. Somewhere between "you weren't watching your six" and "I don't need another damn lecture." Ash trotted between them, dropped a soggy tennis ball at their feet, and sat, just sat, watching, waiting. The ball wasn't anyone's. No one knew where he'd found it. But the argument cracked. One laughed, the other sighed. The tension left, stolen by the ridiculous gravity of a dog who didn't like raised voices. He shadowed drills like an uninvited coach. When the crew ran laps at dawn, he trotted beside them, tongue lolling out like he was laughing at their pace. During hose drills, he'd wait outside the cone boundaries, tail thumping with pride like he ran the course too. Big Mike once saw him dash for a fallen glove like it was a downed survivor and carry it triumphantly to the edge of the line. "Best damn rescue dog," he muttered. "And he's not even certified." Ash had preferences. He liked the floor under the kitchen table during poker night. He didn't care for the chip bags, but he'd lunge for popcorn. He hated the smell of oranges. He wouldn't eat from anyone's hand except Jenny's, and even then only if she didn't look directly at him while offering looked at him sideways, like a secret exchanged in glances. He marveled children on Firehouse school tours. Kids would spot him snoozing behind the bulletin board door and gasp like they'd found treasure. Rodriguez claimed one day a little girl with anxiety, who hadn't spoken all year, said her first words to Ash, just for quiet ones: "He looks like smoke dreams." The brass softened, if reluctantly. No one submitted paperwork to say Ash could stay. No policies were edited. But when the city inspector returned to check on outdated extinguishers and paused at the sight of a fur-covered dog lounging beneath the ready kit shelf, no one blinked. "That your dog?" he asked. "Nope," said Big Mike. "He belongs to..." the building. Ash became part of the lore of Station 47. He was a silhouette in wide-angle photos, a tail blur on the holiday newsletter banner. His face appeared once in the background of a local news segment, half asleep beneath a desk, unbothered by the cameras. Nobody thought about what it meant that he stayed. Nobody said the word adopted. It felt too clean, too blue ink official. For what had happened, Ash wasn't brought in. He remained. That was the miracle, that he remained. It started with snow, not a storm. Not quite, but the kind of quiet fall that painted the sky in hushed greys and dropped everything into slow motion. Flakes caught on the station windows, melted in Ash's fur as he sat unmoved, beneath the open bay door, watching. The call came in just after 8 a.m. Retirement home, East Side. Possible electrical fire. Staff reported strange smells, heat from vents. Then the alarms triggered. Then nothing. Dispatch tagged it a code too, but Jenny knew better. On cold mornings, fires moved differently, coaxed by dry air and closed doors, like breath igniting from the inside. Ash stood as the engine roared to life. He always did. But this time, something in the way his ears pinned back made Jenny pause. "You'll be here when we get back," she murmured, ruffling the fur behind one ear. He blinked once. Ash didn't run that morning, but he didn't stay either. The home sat like a tired beast at the end of a cul-de-sac, a wide square made of wood and memory. Smoke licked at the eaves when the crew arrived. Nothing dramatic, yet just soft grey tendrils curling from vents and windows. An old woman in slippers stood on the sidewalk, cradling a cat with a name tag that simply said, "Mittens, evac." "Complete," Yates barked out as they unloaded gear. "Counting now," came the reply from a nurse, frantic clipboard trembling in her grip. Rodriguez caught the count first. Their short one, room 12, end of the east wing. "Dementia ward, name?" Jenny asked. "Halverson, male, 85, can't hear since the stroke, and he won't come when he doesn't want to." "Great," muttered Big Mike. "One of those, mask up, go," Yates ordered. They moved like memory, quick, rehearsed, automatic, but no one noticed what followed them in. Ash hadn't stayed at the station like he should have. No one saw him jump down from the small utility truck, having slipped into the bed while eyes were elsewhere. No one saw him pace outside the taped line of the retirement home's driveway. Not until later, at 8:41 a.m. A nurse shouted, "There's a dog inside." Yates turned, confused. "What dog?" Jenny's heart sank. Oh no. Inside, smoke was pooling faster than forecast. The east wing was a trap-low ceilings, soft carpet singed into ash, overhead lights that burst like anxious stars. Room 12 felt like the far end of a bridge already falling apart. Jenny and Rodriguez reached the door. She banged twice before forcing it open. Inside, a man, unmoving, slippers on, bare knees, pale and trembling under cotton pajamas. Chair, facing the window, absently humming, deaf to the world trying to burn around him. He didn't flinch as smoke coiled in Halvorsen. Jenny shouted, already knowing he wouldn't answer. Rodriguez moved to grab him under the arms, but then beyond them, the hallway filled with a strange sound. Pause. Ash came from the fog like an apparition. Soot glittered in his fur. His gait was uneven, a favoring of the front right paw, but he didn't stop moving. He entered the room like it already belonged to him, sniffed once at the floor, walked to the man in the chair, then barked, not loud, just sharp, singular. focused. Mr. Halverson blinked. He blinked, then looked down. A dog. Ash stood, tail rigid, ears flat. The old man stared a moment longer, then rose to his feet, confused, shaky, but upright. Rodriguez grabbed him. Jenny looked at Ash. "Lead us," she whispered, not knowing why she said it, only that it was instinct, and he turned. The hallway groaned. The exit they'd used to enter had collapsed behind them, a roof drained to full. The structure bowed. "Back door to the laundry," Rodriguez said. "We've got 60 seconds, tops." Ash ran ahead, not blindly, strategically. He paused when the smoke thickened too fast, turned when Jenny hesitated. He never looked back, but they never lost sight of his tail. Once, when the flames filled the next corridor, he darted into a service hall none of them had seen. Led them around, not through. No. One spoke, not Halvorsen, not the firefighters, not Ash. Just the boiling sound of oxygen turning vicious behind them. They made it out. 43 seconds before collapsed onto the yard, coughing. Black-stained spittle and burned cuffs. Ash stopped only to look once behind him toward the door. They'd come through, then lay down in the snow near the caller's feet. Breathing heavy, one front paw lifted, held wrong. Jenny rushed to him, dropped to her knees, held his face between her gloved hands. "You unbelievable mutt," she whispered. "What were you thinking?" He closed his eyes, blessed her with one faint thump of his tail. The news came fast. Firefighter dog saves man from blaze. The photos hit first. Ash, limping but upright, standing beside Jenny on the lawn. Halvorsen, looking more baffled than grateful. Then came the interviews. Jenny refused. Big Mike waved them off. Ash didn't have a quote prepared, not one he'd use, anyway. But the station changed. The day after, a polished plaque appeared by the lockers. Ash, rescue assist, station 47. Someone taped a tiny gleaming badge to his collar. Custom order, etched in brass, engine 3, honorary. Ash tried to chew it off the next morning. They let him. That week, the mayor visited, shook hands, handed out coins. Asked to pet Ash. Ash tolerated 2 strokes of his head, then wandered off to lie beneath the bay doors again. Rodriguez laughed. "Hero doesn't like hats." Jenny nodded. "He doesn't want praise either. He just wants to be part of it," Mike added, watching Ash rest. "That's enough." The paw healed slowly. The routine returned. Ash still sat sentinel by the door every time the call bell rang, still curled in sunbeams, still chased gloves and broke tense silences between crew members without knowing the science of what he did. But after that fire, people looked at him differently. Not just a mascot, not just a stray. Ash was a firefighter. Just one who never carried a hose. He didn't need to. He carried something else, and everyone knew it. They held a pinning ceremony at the end of the month. Silly, small, just for them. No cameras. Jenny read aloud a simple note to Ash, who walked into fire not out of fear or duty, but out of something deeper. Whatever it was, we're lucky it led him here. They slid the badge back onto his collar. This time, he licked her cheek and kept it on by nightfall. It was scuffed and perfect. Ash fell asleep that evening beside the front desk, curled so tight his tail met his nose. Outside, the cold kept falling. Inside, warmth lived in strange places, on the stove, in the laughter from the TV, in the heartbeats that settled when Ash sighed in his sleep. No alarms that night, but everyone slept. Lighter just knowing he was there, still watching, still waiting, still home. Ash's second winter came like the first, slow, icy, and laced with wood smoke. But now he had sweaters. Not that he loved them, he had a way of slipping out of the sleeves like a magician with no audience. But the crew kept trying. The red fleece was Jenny's idea. Rodriguez insisted on the one with the embroidered badge. By his second gotcha day, Ash had become more than an institution. He was a rhythm, the scuffed beat between boots, a breath everyone took without realizing it. Part of the way Station 47 exhaled. They celebrated that day with a grilled sirloin and 2 cupcakes. One had a candle someone tried to light until Ash sneezed on it. The other just had his name piped in blue icing messy lettering. But heartfelt Big Mike gave a toast to the only one here we all listened to. Ash sneezed again. Someone laughed. So hard they knocked over the cupcake with the candle. There were new faces that year. Tanya Tran, the rookie with nerves of glass and guts of steel, showed up her first week standing stiff in the bay until Ash nuzzled her knee. She flinched. Ash stayed where he was silent, steady. The next morning, she left half a breakfast sandwich on the front steps. By week 3, he slept beneath her cot. Later, when she clipped a tiny carabiner to her keyring in the shape of a pawprint, she told the others it was for courage. Nobody asked if it worked. They already knew. Ash walked rookies through the unwritten rules, where not to sit during poker, how to sweet-talk the vending machine when it jammed, what look Jenny gave when she needed silence instead of words. They joked that Ash had better judgment than the interview board. Parades became tradition. Ash rode beside the driver in Engine 3 during the 4th of July float, a bandana around his neck, sunglasses someone snuck onto his snout for 20 seconds before he poured them off. Children pointed. Someone painted his name in bold on the engine's windshield with erasable chalk. At one Thanksgiving turkey drive, a photographer from Channel 9 squatted down and snapped a picture of Ash licking a spoon of mashed potatoes off the boot of a lieutenant. It made the local paper captioned simply, "Thanksgiving." Families who stopped by the station began asking, "Is he here?" Before even checking the schedule, they didn't mean a firefighter. They meant Ash. There was loss, too. A December call ended in silence. Warehouse collapse. 1 injured, 2 bruised, 1 stayed back for rehab. When Jenkins didn't walk right for a while, Ash walked beside him at half pace. An unspoken adjustment. When Jenkins finally sat down long enough to cry, Ash was already there. Sometimes it wasn't fire, but other kinds of smoke, the kind that curled behind someone's eyes long after a call was over. That's when Ash would sidle between legs, press his weight into shins, lay his muzzle across knees until the shaking stopped. No one trained him for it. No one needed to. The day Caroline retired, after nearly 3 decades on the line, Ash didn't bark or wag when they gave her the plaque. He sat beside her, tail tucked, head resting on her thigh. She later told Jenny, "I could have left 2 years ago, but I didn't want to leave him." Jenny wore white the spring she got married. Rodriguez cried more than she did or claimed. It was allergies and bad catering. Ash didn't do ceremonies, but he was there. He carried the tiny ring pouch across the grass, with the solemn focus of someone who understood that this mattered. He didn't rush, didn't falter, walked that aisle like it was a hallway after a 3 a.m. call. When people clapped, he blinked, then wandered off to nap under the gift table. Jenny, afterward, kissed his forehead and whispered, "You gave me away better than anyone else could have." He licked the base of her wrist, then turned and followed Mike back to the truck. One summer, a boy came with wide eyes but no dog. His house had burned. His dog hadn't made it. Ash didn't run to meet him, just watched, quiet. The boy sat cross-legged in the grass while adults argued over insurance and timelines. After 15 minutes, Ash wandered over and lay down behind him, spine to back, tail flicking once against the boy's hip. The kid reached backward without looking, fingers curled into fur, held there. Didn't say much, but the crew noticed he smiled slightly when he left Darshad habits, too. He chased shadows during sunset drills. Twice a week, he stole Rodriguez's left boot, not the right, never the right hand, left it beside the vending machine. He didn't like bananas. He did like the texture of cardboard box flaps, particularly the ones marked medical supplies. He barked once a single, definitive barkery, New Year's Eve, right as the clock struck 12. Nobody knew how he timed it. He could hear the difference between a general alarm and a false smoke detector call. He seemed to understand when a rescue call came in. He was to wait by the east door instead of the kitchen. And he always knew when the coffee finished brewing. Even if no one made a sound, there were birthdays. Ash didn't have a real one. Not truly, but they gave him one anyway. June 3rd, the day he stepped through the haze and stared Jenny in the eye like he'd found what he'd been looking for. Each year, someone a different person each time brought a treat. One year, it was powered bacon. One year, a custom cake that tasted like peanut butter and loyalty. Another year, Tanya bought a dog-puzzled toy that Ash immediately figured out in 16 seconds. They learned quickly he didn't like hats. One peaked party cone landed on his head for exactly a photo and a half before being shredded into paper spaghetti. But he let Jenny tie a blue ribbon to his collar. That one he wore for a week. Time passed on soft paws. Ash's face lightened around the muzzle, a slow frosting that began just beneath his eyes. The crew didn't mention it at first. At least, not directly. But they noticed that he jumped onto lower perches, that he didn't chase the gloves as fast, that his tail wagged more in response than initiation. Nobody said it out loud. They stopped, bringing home high places to climb, set his water bowl nearer to his favorite resting spots, talked softer in the evenings, let him dream undisturbed even when the coats fell. Ash still ran drills, just slower, more thoughtful. They started compiling a photo album. Pictures snapped over the years. Printed cheap but precious Ash sleeping on turnout gear. Ash beside the station's first engine. Ash with a tiny Santa hat he only wore long enough to scowl at Mike. Rodriguez built a wooden frame with his name on top. Ash's house, they called it. Not that Ash ever used it like a kennel, but he seemed to like having it. Sat beside it, rested his head inside, without going in all the way. One Polaroid showed Ash with 3 rookies asleep around him after a hands-on training. Like kids around campfire coals, someone tucked it into the kitchen bulletin board. Every few weeks, another appeared beside it. Years settle. They don't arrive like storms. They drift, bit by bit, breath by breath, until one day you realize a chapter has grown, it's ending. But even as time sifted through the corners of Station 47, Ash remained constant. The last to sleep, the first to notice someone hurting, the one whose silence always made the most sense. When calls came, engines revved, boots thundered, sirens howled, but Ash waited. He always waited, and each time they returned, there he was. Ash began to slow before anyone said it aloud. Not all at once. not even in ways you'd notice if you weren't looking for them. But those who knew him, who had watched his body move like breath through years of flame and laughter, could feel the shift. He didn't rise as quickly when the tones dropped. The sprint to the bay door turned to a purposeful trot. The leaps into sunbeam patches became careful climbs, not the boundless flops they once were. Still, he tried. Every time the engine revved awake, Ash was there waiting beside it, eyes alert, tail making soft circles in the dusty air. No complaint, no protest, just ... presence. A little slower, a little quieter. Winter came harsh that year. Oak Ridge iced early, the kind of cold that made the roads brittle long before the holidays arrived. Calls came steady chimney flares, sliding sedans, broken bones on black ice. Jenny found Ash curled tighter at night, seeking warmth he once ignored. She'd drape an old turnout across him, tell herself it was for comfort, not need. He started sleeping in the same spot each evening, by the heater in the hallway alcove, near the storage closet nobody touched. It hummed all night. So did he, Rodriguez. Noticed first, he's stiff in the mornings. Jenny nodded. I stopped letting him climb the front seat steps on his own. Mike chimed in. Maybe we cut back his meat treats, stretch those bones a little. But none of that was what they meant. What they meant was, he's getting old, and they said everything else to avoid saying that. On the last quiet Sunday in January, Ash walked to the door and stood there for a long time. Just stood, motionless, but alert, watching snow come down in uneven flakes. Jenny filled his bowl. He didn't move. Rodriguez clicked his tongue, coaxed him with that ridiculous sing-song he only used for pets and pepper plants. Ash didn't move, but he wasn't in pain. His eyes still held their fire. He still offered his paw to Tanya when she sat beside him, still wagged softly when Jenkins dragged his aching leg past with a grunt. Ash wasn't gone, just ... rooted, like something purposeful had taken hold of him and asked him to stay still a while. The call came that night. Just after dinner, small electrical fire in the basement of a downtown deli, contained, but a response was needed. A routine nothing by the books, and back in 40, gear rattled, boots hit pavement. The bay door lifted on its ritual groan. Ash stood one last time when the engine rolled out. Jenny caught it in the rear view, that sleepy silhouette under the heater's glow, watching, still, whole. Waiting. Like always, they got back just past midnight, snow still falling. The station smelled faintly of leftover stew and burnt coffee. The TV blinked low in the break room, left on by someone who forgot. Ash didn't meet them at the door. Not this time. Jenny felt it before she looked. Ash. No answer, no sound but the heater's metallic sigh. They found him curled in his usual place. But something in the stillness was final. His chest did not rise. His tail did not twitch. His eyes half open. Peaceful look toward the door, as if the engine had never left, or had just returned. Jenny sank to her knees beside him. Mike said nothing, just pulled off his gloves and set them down like apology. Rodriguez crouched, brushing fingers over a silvered ear. He waited, he whispered. He waited for us to come back. No one cried right away. The silence did it. First. Jenny stayed with him the longest. She wrapped him softly in the blanket he always kicked off, pressed her face into fur gone stiff with sleep. I told you to wait, she whispered. You always listened. Tanya brought his badge. No one had the heart to take it off. Instead, they left it, glinting faint in the hallway light. Just another piece of who he'd been. Ash, the firefighter, the friend, the ghost who walked out of flame, and now, gone without sound. They held the service at dawn. Not formal, not public, just the way he would have wanted. No speeches, no fanfare, just boots, uniforms, tears half swallowed, a polished wooden box, the nameplate etched with one word, Ash. Big Mike lowered it beside the front flagpole, where spring flowers would greet it before the others had their first coffee. Jenny said, the only thing that felt true. He did his watch. Every shift, every hour. And he did it not because he had to, but because he cared. Silence followed. Then a single bark not from memory, but from the new pup down the block. Too young to know reverence, but old enough to feel the moment. Change, it was enough. The flag flew at half-mast for 4 days. The city offered a digital tribute. Oak Ridge mourns beloved firedog. It got shared 6,000 times, but Station 47 knew the real memorial wasn't online. It was the empty tile by the bay door, the chew marks on the west locker corner, the soft indent in the old turnout pile that no one dared rearrange his water bowl remained, refreshed every day. It took 3 months before anyone had the heart to stop filling it. People asked if they'd get another hero mutt, another Ash. They smiled politely, shrugged. Not yet, but healing doesn't happen in lines or deadlines. It arrives in soft echoes, in pause barely heard, in the weight that slowly lifts from shared silences. Jenny took to walking past the heater alcove every morning, just once. Never stayed long. Rodriguez stopped bringing bananas, said the kitchen. Didn't feel right with them anymore. Mike carved a piece of the firewood pile into a small statue, crude, a dog curled in sleep. No one said who it resembled. It didn't need saying. One day, a child pressed their face to the glass of the station's front door, eyes wide. "Is the dog here?" they asked. Jenny knelt down, shook her head, gentle. "He's resting now." The kid didn't understand, but they peered into the hallway anyway, as if they could see what grown-ups couldn't. And for a second, just a flicker, Jenny thought she saw it too, that shape still waiting, ears pricked, watching, ready as ever. Ash was gone, but the station still sounded like him in the undisturbed corners, in the warmth that lingered just a little longer after long nights, in the stories told, not aloud, but in glances and small chuckles while someone picked a glove off the floor. Some nights, when frost crept across the windows and the wind knocked just right, the crew swore they heard it. The sound of paws in the hall, still watching, still waiting, still home. The station felt quieter in recent weeks. Not silent, never that, but quieter in a way that hummed under the surface, like a song turned low but still playing. Boots still thudded, engines still rumbled, radios still crackled alive, but the spaces between those sounds felt ... emptier. Jenny noticed most of all. She was Captain Parks now. The promotion had come a few months after Ash passed. No party, no ceremony. She didn't want one. Just a nod from the chief and her name etched into the brass plaque outside the door. Sometimes she'd hear something late at night, a soft shuffle near the back hall, the faintest click of nails on concrete. Whenever she turned to look, was nothing, or maybe just something she couldn't see anymore. One morning, Tanya came in carrying a cardboard box that squirmed. She didn't say anything, just set it down on the gear bench and waited. Inside, a dog. Not quite a puppy. Scrappy, ears too big for his head. Fur, the color of buttered toast and cinnamon. Nervous, but curious. Found him behind my apartment dumpster, she said after a while. No tag, no chip, cold and shaking. Jenny looked down. The dog stared up at her. Not the same eyes, not the same stillness, but ... something. They didn't name him right away. Station superstition, names carried weight. Names meant permanence. And nobody at Station 47 knew if they were ready. But the dog stayed. Ate gently from the bowl near the kitchen. Curled himself into two small spaces and eventually grew into them. Followed boots and back steps. Learned the sound of coffee brewing and poker chips clacking. Didn't chase gloves. Didn't stand at the bay door, but he waited at the window, broad paws propped on the ledge. Tail wagging low and steady every time the crew came home. It was Rodriguez who called him Echo the first time. Slipped out during a drill, casual as breath. Come on, Echo, at the hose line. The dog trotted away like the word had been his. All along, no one corrected the name, because, really, it fit. He wasn't Ash, he never could be. But he was a reflection, a reminder. A softness rippling back into the space the silence had left. Things began to settle, then shift not back, but forward. Saturday training days included echo-focused safety discussions. Kids on school tours reached shy fingers toward his ears. A new plaque was mounted in the visitor hallway, images of both dogs, Ash and Echo, side by side, under a simple inscription. Rescued, rescuer, remembered. No medals, no fanfare, just a reminder. Jenny lingered there, sometimes. Coffee in hand, heart snug in her chest. I still miss him, Tanya said one night, pausing beside her. Me too, Jenny replied, and meant it. The memory of Ash didn't fade, but it softened. He lived in small rituals, a pat of the turnout coats before drills. A moment of silence before meals on gotcha day, the careful way they folded the blanket still lying under the heather in the hallway. No one dared wash it. Echo sniffed it once, lay beside it for nearly an hour, then stood and wandered off. Some legacies are carried, others are walked beside. Jenny once dreamt. Ash was waiting at the truck again, not barking, not wagging, just waiting. She offered her hand. He licked it once, then stepped back, as if to say, "You go ahead now. I'll keep watch." She woke up with the sunrise goldening the ceiling. There were no pour sounds in the hole, just Rodriguez swearing at the coffee machine again. The station ran smoother than it had in years. New faces, new laughter, Echo's habit of dragging old boots down the hallway. The featherlight shift of memory becoming comfort instead of ache. Jenny brought a wooden box from her attic one day. Ash's ceremonially folded blanket, his collar, a photo just, one black and white, slightly faded. Ash curled behind Jenny's bunk. She placed it on the mantel above the break room stove. Above it, she hung a frame. 5 words. Ash, firefighter, friend, family. One rainy evening, the bay door rolled open. Echo stood at the edge, watching the streaks fall. A kid stood under the overhangs, small, soaked, holding the leash of a beagle who clearly didn't know what to do in a storm. The kid looked through the glass, pointed, "Is H.E. the new one?" Jenny walked to the window, nodded slowly. "He's learning." The boy smiled, then ran off down the sidewalk the way kids do when fear leaves their legs. Suddenly light. Echo barked once, just once. Soft, but steady. The stories continued, not in grand gestures or loud praise, but in the soft collection of days. Ash had waited, Echo moved forward, and all around them. The crew kept living, laughing, saving, mourning, healing. Together, alive. Home. The engines rolled out one morning sun, haloed behind the clouds, sirens bending against the quiet city, tires on rain-slick streets. Just before turning past the last tree on the block, Jenny glanced in the side mirror, Echo seated by the door. Watching, she blinked, and for half a breath, the shadows curved just right. Two figures sat beside each other, waiting, guarding, seeing them off. Sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us. Sometimes they walk out of smoke and into our lives with no name and a look that says, "I'm here, if you'll have me." And sometimes, even long after they're gone, you can still hear them in the stillness, feel them in the quiet resolve of doing good work at impossible hours. For people who may never know your name, taking one step forward every time the siren calls, knowing somehow that someone will be waiting when you come home again.